Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to a new series on the Workology podcast that we are kicking off that focuses on the future of work. This series is in collaboration with the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology, or PEAT. You can learn more about PEAT at peatworks.org. If the subject of accessibility isn't on your radar, it's time for it to be there. As technology becomes an even more important part of our lives and in our workplaces, it's important that tech is accessible to everyone. But it's not just technologies and tools that need to be accessible. The hiring, selection, and entire employment life cycle should be built with accessibility and inclusiveness in mind. It's not just the responsibility of the employer, but it's also the responsibility of the university and college and the teaching institutions that we're a part of throughout our lives. So we are going to be talking about making our future technology accessible at the university, or even earlier than that today in the Workology podcast. Today I'm joined by Larry Goldberg and Kate Sonka, who are part of the Teach Access Collaborative. Teach Access is a partnership of technology companies dedicated to preparing designers, engineers, and researchers to think and build future technologies inclusively. Teach Access works with academic programs in design, engineering, and HCI that are seeking ways to better prepare students to address the needs of diverse populations. Larry Goldberg is the Senior Director of Accessible Media with Oath, formerly Yahoo, and Kate Sonka is Assistant Director of Academic Technology for the College of Arts and Letters at Michigan State University. Larry and Kate, welcome to the Workology podcast.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So we're going to be talking about how we can make our future technology accessible. And let's talk a little bit about your guys' backgrounds. I'll start with you first, Larry. Tell us about your background and how you came to where you are today.
Well, I've been involved in the field of making technology and media accessible for more than 30 years. Most of my career was with WGBH Public Broadcasting in Boston, where closed captioning was invented, video description for the blind, and we created a research and development arm called the National Center for Accessible Media, which advocated for making technology more accessible, developed standards, developed legislation, and consulted with many major companies. One of the companies we consulted with was Yahoo, and after a few years of a wonderful relationship there, the folks at Yahoo offered me a job to implement some of the standards and regulations that I helped develop while I was at WGBH.
Awesome. What about you, Kate? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. When I came back to Michigan State, as part of my work in academic technology, one of the projects that I was assigned was accessibility. And this was about 4 years ago. So at the time, it was kind of familiar to me, but really in the last 4 years, I've really kind of gone down that path quite a bit. So I do a variety of things to support accessibility on campus. So working with faculty, working with students, ensuring that course content and websites are accessible to anyone who's trying to access those.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you both got involved in Teach Access and what your roles are within the organization. So first, I will start with Larry again.
Great. So once I joined Yahoo, which has become Oath after our acquisition by Verizon last summer, I was talking with a lot of my colleagues in the field of technology and accessibility, and we all realized that we spend a tremendous amount of time training our colleagues, developers, and designers on what does it really mean to make a mobile app or a website accessible. And as much as that was a very engaging and rewarding series of trainings, we realized we would be served a lot better, our companies would and our end users would, if our new employees actually came to us with some of the basic knowledge about accessible design and development. And in talking with Facebook and Google and Microsoft and Adobe and many others, it was pretty clear we needed to focus on our friends in the higher education field. If the students would learn some of these basics while they're in school, when they came to us, they'd hit the ground running. We would be able to serve our users a lot better. We could create better and faster technologies. And really start working on the higher order issues of innovation around the field of accessible technology.
What about you, Kate?
Sure. So it actually, a colleague of mine was attending the CSUN conference, which is the California State University Northridge conference. And he went into a presentation that Larry was leading on Teach Access. It was a new initiative getting started. Ended up through a series of events, I was able to go out and attend the kickoff meeting. And it really supports a lot of what I do for our college. Experiential learning is one of the things that I'm passionate about professionally, and also look to create opportunities for our students to really engage in learning in various ways. And Teach Access was really one of those things where I saw a lot of overlap between supporting our faculty so that they are helping students be prepared so that when they leave, whether they're hired by a company like Oath or any other company, they're prepared to tackle whatever is coming their way. So I found that Teach Access was a really great way to kind of bring together student experience as well as faculty, helping them in their classrooms being able to teach this content. So there's been some interesting overlaps.
I love this, and I love that employers are coming together with colleges and universities and academia to help drive the conversation and the training and the support around accessibility at the university and student level before, like Larry was saying, they go off to start their careers at various organizations. Larry, can you kind of run through a little bit maybe some of the organizations again that are involved with Teach Access, because there are some very notable and exciting and innovative technology companies that are part of this.
There sure are, and I think a lot of the power of our ability to make some change in this field is the fact that we've gathered together across companies that sometimes are competitive, but in the field of accessibility are always holding hands and trying to advance each of our initiatives. So it started right off the bat with Yahoo and Facebook sitting out on the patio at the CSUN conference and coming up with this notion of how can we band together to make change. Right away and immediately we have friends across the industry. Google jumped right in. Microsoft's chief accessibility officer said, I am violently supporting this. And she really jumped right in and dedicated Microsoft resources. Adobe, as the leading company for supplying design tools, clearly saw it in their interest, and their involvement in accessible design has been longstanding. And we have it's a great community in terms of Silicon Valley and Redmond and the Midwest and New York and Boston. We know each other pretty well. So it was pretty quick that we then brought in Intuit and PayPal and Dropbox, and then some other interesting companies that were struggling with the same interest and issues in the banking field, because they too need to work on making sure what they're offering is accessible. So Capital One, TD Bank was interested. Now Walmart just joined. All of us lining up around the same issue of we need to be able to create technologies that are born accessible, and that's the term we like to use. No fixing broken, inaccessible stuff, born accessible right off the bat. Luckily, all of us also had some great relationships with universities. Michigan State, University of Michigan, Georgia Tech, the whole Cal State system, Olin College in Massachusetts. Throughout the country, there were champions within all of these universities, and we turned to them first and said, this is the initiative we're trying to launch. We think we have some power, speaking from these incredible companies, Can you help us reach the faculty at your institutions and talk about how we can incentivize the professors to begin building this in to the courses that they were already teaching?
I really love that this is a groundswell effort and you're involving all the right players and innovators and educators in kind of helping to drive the change within the schools and then also in your respective organizations.
Yeah, and the next thing we really need to do as we're growing this within our companies and then working with the universities is to take it to the next level. We've already put language in our job descriptions for relevant positions that knowledge of accessible design and development preferred or even required. And now our HR teams, our talent acquisition, our recruiters, we want them to begin actually implementing this in career fairs and job fairs on campus, in first-line interviews to ask the question, well, what do you know about accessible design? Have you ever heard of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? And for any applicants who can answer those questions well, they're definitely going to have a leg up when we do our hiring.
Can you talk a little bit about the organizations again that are part of Teach Access? It doesn't sound like it's just technology companies, it's financial institutions. Are there any specific technology types or restrictions for membership? If maybe somebody listening here was like, well, this sounds great, I'd like to get involved, kind of whatever the requirements and how do we make that happen?
For companies, we're interested in companies that are in the tech field. So that helps, or use technology to serve their customers. So that's pretty much anyone. We ask that if they're coming to us, there's a small contribution we ask. So far, it's been very modest. We ask for time of a dedicated employee to participate in our task force work, where we're having 6 or more major initiatives we're looking for volunteer help on. And an important issue, we've seen this for a lot of companies who first hear about Teach Access. They immediately come to us to think that this is where they can learn how to make technology accessible. And even though we have quite a few experts involved with Teach Access, there are other resources where companies can go to learn the basics about what the W3C has done and what does Section 508 mean. If you want to get involved with us, it means you're looking to help drive this issue and to support faculty. And that's really what our focus is. We're trying to stay very focused on that, to begin infusing these principles into mainstream courses. And if a company wants to get involved, they should go to the Teach Access website, teachaccess.org. And there's information there about membership, how to get in touch, what our initiatives are, and what we ask of companies who are getting involved.
Well, Kate, can you talk a little bit about training and resources that students, teachers, and professors have access to as a result of Teach Access?
Absolutely. One of the great things that's come out of Teach Access are our faculty boot camps. We've done a few of them in different parts of the country, but this is where faculty who teach about accessibility or faculty who want to teach about accessibility but could benefit from some additional support are able to sign up to have some really targeted one-on-one instructional time essentially with our Teach Access industry partners. There's been a variety of universities involved in this and a variety of industry, but the idea here is that over the course of a day or a half day, faculty and instructors really get to understand what is accessibility, how do I teach this in my classroom, what are the important things that students should take away from it. So boot camps have really been a wonderful aspect of Teach Access. Another one is that many of the industry partners have agreed to be available, if you will, for an hour of their time or whatever makes sense for them and the faculty to essentially kind of do a video guest lecture. So if I'm teaching a class and I have time in one of my days, I could ask Larry, would you be able to spare an hour of your time to come and talk virtually with my students about accessibility on whatever topic it is that we're trying to address that day? So from those two, there's really some great resources and assistance from that. One of the initiatives that we're about to pilot at the end of May this year is a study away. So the study away program is similar in concept to a study abroad. Students just remain in the United States. But in this case, we at Michigan State, along with 3 other Teach Access institutional partners, 3 other universities, are taking out about 30 students to Silicon Valley at the end of May. Over 1 week, they will visit 5 different Teach Access industry partners to learn about the accessibility landscape specifically in those companies, and then also start to gain or continue to understand the accessibility landscape kind of in general in that region and through some of our partners. The idea here is that students will really come away with an understanding of what does it mean to be an accessibility professional? What are people doing? What are the projects that are in front of a lot of the companies that they'll be visiting with? So as an institution, there's quite a few ways that we can partner with our Teach Access industry partners, that we can work with our Teach Access industry partners to really benefit from their knowledge and help strengthen what we're doing in our own classrooms.
I love that you're having the students go out to the respective Teach Access organizations, partners, and they get to see firsthand and they get to build real professional relationships and ask real world questions. And I would think as a member, this is a great opportunity to engage with some really great talent that is going to be looking for work shortly and graduating from the university and colleges.
Absolutely.
Let's take a bit of a reset. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and you're listening to the WORKOLOGY podcast in partnership with PEAT. Today, we're talking about Teach Access and accessibility training for university colleges and even in high school and elementary. We're talking with Kate Sonka and Larry Goldberg. You can connect with Kate on Twitter. It's at Kate, Kate _Sonka, SONKA.
The Workology Podcast Future of Work series is supported by PEAT, the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. PEAT's initiative is to foster collaboration and action around accessible technology in the workplace. PEAT is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP. Learn more about PEAT at peatworks.org. That's PEATWORKS.org.
As we dive more into our Future of Work series with PEAT, I am becoming more and more aware, as I hope you are, as you've been listening to this conversation that we've had, about how much of the world isn't accessible to everyone, especially people with disabilities. And this includes, and Larry alluded to this a little bit earlier, what might seem like a small area to some, but the hiring process, including job descriptions. Larry talked a little bit about the commitment to including into job descriptions experience on the subject of accessibility. I will include a link to some of more resources, but I want to kind of talk a little bit more about this, Larry. Do you have any learnings from this, maybe personally at Oath, or maybe some of the other partner organizations, about how maybe this has impacted hires or maybe improved or changed the type of candidates that are coming to your or other partners' organizations?
Well, I think we're looking at a long-term result out of both what Teach Access is doing and all of the companies who are involved, knowing that to create better, more accessible technologies, we really need a workforce that is directly familiar with what does it mean to have a disability and to use technology and to design technology. There's a saying in the disability advocacy community, nothing about us without us. And that really strikes home for us. If you are a developer and you've never met a blind person, you have no familiarity with what it's like to not be able to hear or to use your hands with full dexterity, it's going to be a little abstract to you. But as we can and ratchet up our own hiring practices and help our managers really understand more about what does it mean to work with a deaf employee. It's really going to help us do a better job recruiting, to really understand what kind of accommodations we can make that are most of the time fairly simple and straightforward. And then we can improve the nature and the diversity of our own workforces, so that a development team who might have someone with a temporary or permanent disability can really contribute much better to the improvement of our products.
I will say again that my work with PEAT has really opened my eyes, and something as simple as a PowerPoint presentation. There are additional steps that you need to go to make something like that fully accessible, or a webinar where people are able to participate or be a part of the conversation and hear and see and feel what you're saying. So for me, it's been really eye-opening, and I've been in human resources and recruiting a long time and have worked with a lot of different kinds of people and hired a lot of different kinds of people, but there are just some things that I think we take for granted.
Yeah, I think most of the people in my company that I talk to about this are really good-hearted people, and I think that's true across the board. They just don't have the awareness. And when their eyes are open to the nature of how people with disabilities use technology, they embrace it wholeheartedly. But our job really is to find ways to really raise awareness, make people feel more comfortable around the issue. I didn't really meet a deaf or a blind person until I was probably in my late 30s, mid 30s. And I went through all the early learning processes, the discomfort, and I'm very sympathetic with people who this is new to them. Really, once they understand that people with disabilities are just like everyone else, or they're different in every way that everyone else is, things flow a lot better. But it's those early encounters, certainly in the interview process and the onboarding process and the daily workload. It's not hard to do. It's just something people need to learn.
Well, I love that you're a part of this conversation and that you're participating in this podcast, because we're helping to drive that awareness about the subject of accessibility and talking about how, as HR and recruiting leaders, we can push our organizations forward to making that hiring, selection, and interview process, or the workplace, more accessible. So I love that you guys are doing that with job descriptions, and certainly all the conversations and trainings and learnings that are happening in the workplace as a result of your guys' work.
Yeah, I would like to add that the issues of diverse workplaces in the tech sector has been quite a hot one over the past few years. But the inclusion of people with disabilities as part of that diversity discussion is actually, unfortunately, relatively new. We've been talking about women and people of color in the tech world, and now we're finally making sure that we are including people with disabilities as part of this broader discussion of having a diverse workforce, having people bring their whole self to work. And luckily, in our organization at Oath, we are like a startup after the merger with AOL. So we're able to introduce all these new concepts as we shape our diversity initiatives, and it's working quite well.
Kate, I wondered you talked a little bit about the boot camps and the kind of study away programs. What are some other ways that the accessibility training or teaching is being worked into the university and college level classes and programs?
Sure. So we have, as part of kind of the first iteration of Teach Access, we all kind of divided ourselves into task forces. And we had a variety of task forces looking at different things. So I went into the driving academic engagement task force, but we had some others that were looking at creating resources, so helping to create teaching resources that could be adopted or used by faculty. And to that end, kind of as it's evolved, we will be doing some faculty grants to help create further resources that could be used. We also had a group that was working on introducing language or working with governing bodies like ABET or some of the other organizations that set standards for certain majors or certain programs. So in engineering, for example, or computer science, for certain programs, there's an outside entity that's saying in order for a student to be qualified to say that they are whatever they are as a graduate of this program, we know that they've met these certain qualifications. So there's a group that was working on talking to some of these organizations to introduce language to encourage faculty to adopt more accessibility teaching into their curriculum. Moving forward, there's some other potential ideas swirling out there, but really as an organization or as a collaboration, I guess, everyone is finding where they fit and finding ways that they can have an impact in what ways make sense to them.
How long has Teach Access been an entity or an organization?
Well, it started as a wonderful idea that no one could avoid. Everyone embraced it. I think the Kickstart meeting that Kate mentioned was in April of 2016, if I'm recalling correctly. So we're about 2 years old.
Wow.
And our early days really was trying to shape our initiatives. What's the best way we could have an impact at scale? We're always talking about how we can have an impact to large numbers of students, to all the faculty or who are really hungry for this information. And in our first 2 years, we've accomplished quite a bit. We've gotten an award from the FCC and the Nobility Organization out of Austin. And everyone we talk to about this is just fully engaged. And it's great now to have support from the PEAT project and the U.S. Department of Labor to help us actually implement some of the great ambitious ideas we have.
Well, I just want to reiterate to folks, if they want to get involved, the best place to go is teachaccess.org, and you can find out how to become a part of the organization and help further these great programs and training and collaboration that's happening between the university and colleges and then the tech companies and employers. So I think it's a great cause, and I hope that some of you choose to become a part of it. Larry and Kate, thank you for joining us today. Where can people go to learn more about you guys? So let's say they want to connect maybe with each of you. We talked about Teach Access, but where can they go to connect with you specifically?
Well, I'm kind of an old timer. I love email. Yes, I have a Twitter account. My Facebook page is for private purposes. But yes, people can write to me at larryg@oath.com.
And I'm happy to connect with anyone on Twitter. My handle is at Kate_Sonka, and that's KATE_SONKA, or happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. And you can find me, Kate Sonka.
Awesome. And we'll have access and on the transcript here, links to all their Twitters and their LinkedIns and also email addresses and things. So thank you so much again for taking time to join and talk with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Teach Access is a great organization, and I love the partnership and collaboration that is happening. It makes my heart happy to know that companies are working to make their tech as well as their employment processes more accessible. I hope that you'll think more about accessibility in your own workplaces and also reach out to Teach Access and consider being a part of their mission to drive change. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill. Until next time, you can visit workology.com to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller-Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.